Hello and welcome to ADTV. Today you catch up with us on the bank to talk you through some different styles and techniques of PVA fishing. Now the first thing we're going to look at is solid bags. Now the name kind of gives it away in the fact that it's a solid bag of PVA which you put your whole rig inside with your freebies and your bait offerings of your choice, and then you seal the bag up either with some string or tape, or I like to use the Fox Rapide system, which is more of a lick and stick, and it's really quick and it's just a great system that's speeded the whole process up of making them. Now solid bags for me has probably become one of the most popular styles of fishing in the style that I do. I do a lot of sort of big carp competitions and they've become really popular. One, because for a speed aspect, if you're ultra prepared and you really want to, you could make 30, 40, 50 of these bags up on leaders with your hook bait, everything in there all prepared, bait in there tied up, take them in a bucket, and it then literally a case of clip them on and off. Every time you catch a fish, you're out again in seconds. So speed is one great aspect for solid bag fishing. Next is the fact that they can be fished pretty much anywhere. If I was going to turn up to a lake and I wasn't sure what I was casting on, solid bags would be well up there in my choice of rigs to fish, because one, you know your rig can't tangle, everything's inside the bag with your bait, and then secondly, they sit really well on anything. So long as it's not really deep weed, if you had a bit of chard or some silt or a little bit of weed, the bag sort of sinks slower than conventional lead setup and it sits nicely on there. When it opens up, it presents a perfect pile of bait and you know your rig's sitting well. So presentation on different things is another great thing about PVA. And also what the solid bag allows you to do is mess around with liquids and stuff like that. As long as it's PVA friendly, you can kind of put whatever you want inside a solid bag. But because it is solid, like I said, people like to inject sort of PVA friendly liquids in there so you get maximum attract out of it with no feed particles. That can be quite effective in winter. I know a few people who do that. And again, that's another thing with solid bags that you perhaps can't do with the other PVA products. There's a few different sizes of bags and styles of bag in the market. So if you wanted to fish real long distances, PVA, you get the real small bags. That is brilliant. I can't think of a better casting rig. The aerodynamics is great, it's nice and solid, it's just like casting a straight lead base. You've got no rig spinning round and they are perfect for long distance fishing. Now on the flip side of that, if you didn't want to cast very far but you wanted to present a big pile of bait, perhaps in a hole in a weed somewhere really close in, you could use a much larger bag and sort of just swing it off the rod tip. So there's plenty of different sizes available, and on top of that you can also get perforated and unperforated bags. Now personally for me, I like to keep it really simple. I use the perforated bags all the while, so basically they'll sink at uniform speed and it'll let the water attack it much faster as well, so the bag opens nice and quick. But if you wanted to, you could get the non-perforated and sort of pierce your own holes in there, because they would kind of float if you didn't put some holes in it. But you could make it perhaps sink slower if it was falling on top of weed. You could get a non-perforated and just sort of pierce a couple of holes in it yourself. So they're the PVA bag fishing, and solid PVA bag fishing, like I said, is well up there on one of my rigs to fish. Now next we'll take a look at the funnel web systems. Now probably across the country this is the most popular PVA product ever used, and you can see why just because of how versatile it is. So the funnel web system is great. It comes on a nice it comes in a case on a nice tube, and you make the bags the size that you want to make them. So it's just a mesh bag rather than solid this time, and you just tie a couple of knots each end with your chosen bait in there, and that's where it does come into own. Because again, long as it's PVA friendly, you can pretty much use whatever bait you wish. You could use maggots, small particles, absolutely anything, and you size the size of the bag to what you want it to be. If you wanted it to be really small because you were long distance fishing, there's a long chuck version available which you'd make tiny little sticks out of and thread them onto your rig, and that's great for real long distances. There's also another size which is the boilie funnel web size. Now that kind of gives it away in its own name. You'd be putting sort of the perfect size to say a 15-16mm bait. You perhaps put 3 or 4 in there, make a nice little neat bag, and that's the boilie funnel web sorted. And then you've got the funnel web, which is the biggest size available in the mesh systems, which that's where you could use for whatever you wanted. You could put what bait in there, and it just makes a bigger bag. So you decipher what sort of size or bag you feel you need for your style of fishing. Personally, for me, funnel web, I use this a lot in one particular aspect, and if you haven't used this, perhaps give it a go, because this caught me a lot of fish recently, is the fact that I'd fill the funnel web with dry ground bait. Now what that would actually, with a few pellets in there as well, but what that would actually do is it would make the bag float, and my lead would hit down, settle, but my rig would still be popped up for a few seconds after that until the bag took on water, and then that would slowly settle on top of that. So what I was doing is putting an absolute minimum amount of bait on there, but I was guaranteeing that I was presenting my rig well, because it was just popping up out of any debris and then laying up back there. So there's perhaps an extra tip if you haven't tried it for that purpose. Get out there and give that a go, because that really did make a big difference to me. And the way you hook the bags on, again, I've mentioned a couple of them. You can thread them on your rig. That's one of the beauties of funnel web, to stop hairs tangling. Or you can just nick them on. So you could have loads of these tied up. If you were catching a lot of fish quick, you literally just nick your hook on, cast out there, and again, you're fishing really, really quick. So that's the funnel web, a quick look over that. Next, we'll have a look at PVA string or PVA tape, both pretty much used for the same applications. So one of the uses is for, as we mentioned with a solid bag, is sealing the top of the bags up with string or tape. Or also some people like to tie the back of the hair to the hook. So if you're casting a long way, one of the big things is has my hair tangled, and there's nothing wrong with having a rig sitting out there and not knowing if it's right. So you can just tie the back of your hair to your hook with a PVA, and you know that's going to work and it's going to be presenting well. But the main thing really, and probably why it was produced, was for the stringer. Probably used least now out of all the PVAs, but at one point it was really popular to great effect. And I think there's still a gap in there for it in certain situations. So the PVA string, what you'd do is you'd sort of thread 2 or 3 boilies, even more if you wanted to, onto the string, and then you'd attach that to your hook. So you sort of presented a perfect 3, 4, 5 bait sort of situation, really close together, but the perfect meal just for one fish to come along. And that, like I said, a few years back, that was really, really effective. Everyone was using stringers, and a lot of fish were coming out. So like I said, there's definitely a place in the market for that. And then lastly, the last PVA product I'm going to talk you through is certainly the one that I used most for my personal fishing. Now, that's actually not a PVA that presents any bait, but it's just PVA foam nuggets. Now, I do a lot of long distance fishing over boilie, and this is where they come in absolutely perfectly, because technically I don't want to get any bait out there, which is what the other PVA systems we've talked through allows you to do. But what I do want is I want to make sure my rig goes out there well and is presenting on anything like a cast on. So the PVA foam would float. So actually, a bit like I said for my dry ground bait bags, but this PVA is so much smaller when it's on your hook. So you'd fold it round your hook, and then as you cast it out, your lead would settle, your PVA nugget would be popping your rig up, it would eventually dissolve enough to pop up and float to the surface, and your rig would just ping out straight and you'd be fishing. And then again, another plus point of that is that I said I do a lot of this over boilie fishing. Once that foam pops up to the surface, you've got a great visual point for a few minutes until that drifts off out of your peg to where your rig has actually landed. So you could fire out from a throwing stick or a catapult around that area, and it's a great visual reference to where you're feeding. So that's a closer look at PVA products on the market today. Like I said, these are accountable for thousands of captures across the country, literally every month. And if you're not out there using any of these already, get down to your local tackle shop, because it will make a huge difference into your fishing. Well, there we are. I've seen one fish show today. It's been a real tough day, and it was at extreme range, well over 100. And as I said earlier, I've picked the PVA weapon of choice, and it's resulted in a little perfectly presented pile of bait for this fella to come along and snaffle it up. So more than chuffed with that on a tough day. Certainly, as we mentioned earlier, PVA can get you the results.